Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another video. I hope you guys are doing well today. In this video I'm going to be talking about Restoration Druid, going through my recommendations for talents, stat priorities, spell priority, spell rotation, things like that. Basically just going through everything that I know about Resto Druid on the pre-patch for BFA. So at the moment, this is the setup I've been using for dungeons. There is a couple of changes you can make. Just to talk through, before we get into anything else, this is kind of my healing breakdown at the moment, my priority. Rejuvenation, without a doubt, is my highest healing ability. I spam it on everyone. Everybody should have Rejuvenation all the time. Wild Growth, I use this ability way too much. This is my favourite ability. It heals a decent amount, and I very much like to pair it with Flourish. Typically, before I'm about to use Flourish, I will always put Wild Growth up. It heals a lot, and it does tick for a fair bit, so it's a nice ability to have on. Tranquility, now I'm using Inner Peace at the moment, and we're going to talk about my talents in a minute as to what I'm using and different things like that. You can definitely use Stonebark, and you'll see this drop down a lot. I use Tranquility quite a lot. There is a nice thing you can do right now. Don't know if it was possible before, but you can definitely Tranquility into Flourish, which obviously Tranquility, a lot of the healing comes from the instant heal, but you also do get a significant amount of healing from the hot as well, and Flourish just increases the duration and increases the rate of the heal by 100%. So you're really going to see some major healing come out when you use that, and I was using it a fair bit. You don't have to pair them together, and they're probably better as two separate cooldowns, especially since 1.5 and 2 minute cooldowns aren't the shortest in like any scenario, raid or Mythic Plus. But I tried them together a couple of times. If things were going completely bad, Wild Growth, Trank, Flourish, sorted. Regrowth. Obviously, Regrowth is your new healing touch as well. You've lost healing touch, so if you ever need just a flat instant heal, Regrowth is really nice. I was using Efflorescence a lot. Now, Efflorescence, I would say, is very inefficient if you're not using Spring Blossoms, because obviously Spring Blossoms gives that heal over time as well, does count towards your mastery, so overall very strong, but I was using it a lot just for the extra healing and the fact that I was trying to get as much damage off as possible as well. If I actually go to damage on this is from the 18 plus that I've just done, which was uploaded yesterday, or a couple of days ago. I've actually only just recorded it in my time though. When we look at sort of total damage done, I was keeping a lot of solar wraths and keeping dots on everything and things like that. So I was trying to DPS quite a lot. So Efflorescence was just my way of putting a heal over time down that I didn't have to worry about, that allowed me to do DPS, which was very helpful. Swiftmend, wasn't using Swiftmend too much. Again, using Swiftmend for what it was actually intended for, which is a panic heal. Things go bad, you use Swiftmend. Scenario Ward was my way of saving the tank. And what I mean by that is we had a DK tank. He was very good, credit to him. But the problem with a lot of tanks at the moment is they're going into a fight and getting insta-killed. Before they get to put active mitigation up or heals or anything like that, they're just walking into a fight and getting insta-killed. If you get them through that part, they're fine. They stabilize and there's not a problem. So Scenario Ward and Ironbark was my way of getting through that. And you can actually rotate them. You use Scenario Ward on one pull, Ironbark on the next one, and you just keep rotating and the tanks will be fine on each big pull. Life Bloom honestly wasn't healing very much. Between that and the Bloom was doing almost nothing. So Life Bloom is not a priority for me to be spamming at the moment. Obviously it's a very cheap heal, so you do kind of want to keep one up, but I wouldn't swap it around. Put it on a target, just forget it's there basically at the moment. Cultivation, obviously one of my talents, heals for 3.5%. So between like just Rejuve healing, obviously Cultivation being a part of Rejuve healing, that's almost 500k healing just from them two abilities. Massive. So I would say Cultivation for dungeon healing is mandatory right now, maybe even raid healing, with if you're going to be using the shoulders, the Amanthal's Wisdom shoulders, which you should be in raid healing, just because typically, again, I've said this before, damage is quite bursty at the moment, so having Rejuvenate, having Cultivation, where you've taken a lot of damage, your whole raid all of a sudden gets Cultivation, that's another hot, that means your mastery is going to be kicking in as another multiplier. You're going to be getting that extra hot, which is actually healing in its own right as well, and yeah, it's such a nice setup. Soul of the Forest I think is just way too weak, and then Incarnation is very viable, but again, we'll talk about talents in a minute. Yeah, so talking about this, our healing done is pretty nice. In terms of overhealing, we overheal a lot. Again, Efflorescence. This is kind of what we want to see. Wild Growth overhealing a lot. So I'm not using Wild Growth efficiently at all, but it heals a lot. You really underestimate how much that is. And again, like I said, I was pairing that up with Flourish a lot, so it does kind of work together so well that everybody gets topped off, and it is going to overheal. Efflorescence, like I said, I was just putting it down as needed. Tranquility, again, same logic, using it with Flourish or using it with anything else, it's going to overheal. Rejuve, and then Rejuve is just a little bit greedy healing. Hot healing, obviously, is going to be like that. What we don't want to see is ever regrowth anywhere high up here, because it means that we're panic healing someone that doesn't need to be panic healed. But yeah, other than that, I'm okay with the way this looks. So let's talk talents. Abundance. For each rejuvenation you have active, regrowth cost is reduced by 6%, and the critical effect chance is increased by 6%. So we look at regrowth baseline. I believe it actually has a base crit increase somewhere. Okay, I can't find it, but I believe it does still actually have a base crit increase. So Abundance is just going to increase that more so. Maybe that got removed with the pre-patch. Definitely viable in both Mythic Plus and Raid Healing. I would say Scenario Ward is just too key in Mythic Plus that you maybe don't want to use Abundance. However, obviously if you do use it, 5 rejuves on everyone, or 10 if you're using Germination, you can be able to spam out them regrowths, and they're all going to be critting for high amounts. Prosperity, useless. Please do not use this talent. If you are going to try and use it, Soul of the Forest is obviously its amazing counterpart, because you get the benefits. That's literally the point of Prosperity. But with Soul of the Forest not being a particularly competitive talent either, I would say Prosperity, by the same logic, isn't. Scenario Ward, again, I would say Abundance for Raid Healing and Scenario Ward for Mythic Plus. You can use this in Raid Healing, but honestly, Holy Pallies, Holy Priests are going to be picking up Disc Priest Healing as well. They're going to be picking up Raid Healing, Tank Healing. Druids are going to be Raid Healing again. Like, there's actual defined roles of healing. Druids are Raid Healing again. You don't need Scenario Ward. So I'd say Abundance for Raid Healing, and like I said, Scenario Ward for Dungeons. In the 30 tier, any of these are viable. Wild Charge I personally like, because I'm quite good at using like the human form leap, or the cat form leap to an enemy, or travel form if I can use it inside raids and stuff like that. You can do a lot with it. It gives you a lot of mobility if you use it correctly, so just my personal opinion. We look at the 45 tier. Guardian Affinity really is... Guardian and Feral is the only 2 viable ones. Don't use Balance Affinity, honestly. It's just not worth it. You don't get enough out of it. Feral Affinity, if you're wanting to do as much single target DPS as possible, and single target is very, very important, and if you are going to use Feral Affinity, make sure you have the Chatoyant Signet. It's crucial. It increases your energy regen and increases your maximum energy, so when you start like cat weaving, you go into cat form with a lot of more energy. You've already banked 250 energy, you go in, burn all of it, and then swap out, and it does make it a lot nicer of a rotation. But Guardian for everything else. If you want to live, Guardian Affinity. We then look at the 60 tier, Mighty Bash, Mass Entanglement, and Typhoon. Mass Entanglement and Typhoon are kind of my recommendations. If you ever use Cephas, use Mass Entanglement. If not, I would say Typhoon's as good, because you have Ursul's Vortex. That combination is just crazy for grouping mobs up. If you don't have a DK tank, that's almost mandatory for Resto Druids. In Mythic Plus, in raids, none of them are ever really great. Typhoon for things like Agromar ads, I guess. There's not really many circumstances where any of these are particularly viable. The 75 tier, Soul of the Forest, Cultivation, Incarnation. Cultivation is my favourite personally, because I like to rejuve blanket the raid with Amanthol's Wisdom. However, Incarnation is also viable. Buffs, increases the healing and mana reduction, and gives mana reduction to rejuve. More targets with Wild Growth, instant cast and more healing on regrowth, and instant cast on Entangling Roots, I believe. And obviously the increased healing and armor. All things that give great benefit to raid healing and just healing in general. But for me personally, Cultivation just wins out. The level 90 tier, I'd say this is the closest tier. All 3 are viable. You have Spring Blossoms, which if you're going to be... If there's ever a point of like group stacking, Efflorescence is amazing, and Spring Blossoms on top of that is just incredible for passive healing. Stonebark, Mythic pluses, I'd say this is very, very viable. I wouldn't say it's as viable in raid healing or in raid circumstances. But in Mythic Plus, you want to be using Iron Bark just on cooldown on these tanks. They're going to be getting bursted down. You need that survivability. The extra damage reduction, as well as the increased healing from your heal over time, is going to be huge. So I'd say that's very, very viable, if not the best talent for Mythic Plus. I would say Spring Blossoms is the best if there ever is like raid healing where you're stacked. And Inner Peace is just a good all-rounder. You can use it in both. I personally prefer it for raid healing because I love Tranquility as a cooldown, and I do like rotating healing cooldowns, so having that on a 2-minute cooldown is nice. But again, if there's raid healing like on Grothy Worldbreaker, everybody's stacked up, you're going to want Efflorescence down, and therefore Spring Blossoms is just the more efficient option. It does kind of swap between the two at the moment in Antorus. And then the level 100 tree. Photosynthesis is a weird one. While your Life Bloom is on yourself, your periodic heals heal 15% faster. While your Life Bloom is on an ally, your periodic heals have heals on them have a 5% chance to cause it to bloom. So I would say the effect on allies is terrible right now. 5% chance is too low, and the fact that it does consume when it blooms, pretty terrible. However, Life Bloom on yourself, your periodic heals heal 15% faster on everybody. So you look at how good Flourish is just because it has that increased rate of heal. You could have that permanently with Photosynthesis. It's a low cost ability. You just have it spammed onto yourself every like 15 seconds. And that's all it is. You just keep up a permanent 15% increase in healing. I think it can be viable, but I haven't really done too much testing with it yet. It's kind of a weird one at the moment. Germination, you can apply Rejuvenation twice to the same target. Now, for constant throughput, I would say this is your best talent. People have used both this and Flourish in raid healing already in Mythic, so both are definitely viable. However, Germination for me, you only really use Rejuve then. Occasionally you might use a Wild Growth if things are going really bad, but you just Rejuve spam the whole group. Cultivation is a must-have at that point, and I would honestly use Inner Peace because you don't want to be using the mana on Efflorescence. And you just, like I said, you just spam Rejuves on everybody. Things go bad, you have a Tranquility there. And then Flourish, you have, obviously, works really well if you want to get that massive like raid cooldown. It's going to top everybody up, no questions asked, if you Tranquility and Flourish. However, just in general, this is a very, very strong heal. Does also work to Spring Blossoms. The heal over time on Spring Blossoms. Flourish does increase the duration. So, ultimately, Cultivation it works on as well, and it increases the rate of your heal. So it's basically your old artifact ability as well. I believe it's 150% rather than 100, but still very, very strong cooldown. If you use this correctly and if you use this well, it's amazing. So I would say you're gonna want to raid if you're gonna want raid cooldowns and raid healing, Flourish is probably the best. If you just want like constant throughput, Germination. For Mythic Pluses, both are viable. Germination's been the more consistent option because you just rejuve spam, 10 rejuves your whole group. And it's really, really strong, especially, like I said, if you're going to be using Amanthal's Wisdom, sorry. Them are way too similar. But yeah, so let's talk about legendaries, actually. Every single person that I've seen in raid healing is using either Prydaz and Amanthal's Wisdom, or Amanthal's Wisdom and the Velen's Future Sight, or Prydaz and Velen's Future Sight. Prydaz is amazing. I personally won't be dropping this. Sorry, I had to shout down a sec. Yeah, so Prydaz is amazing. I personally will be using this just constantly. For Mythic Plus, I use Lady and the Child so I can Moonfire spam an entire pack very quickly, get them dots out, and as you can see, it does actually do a lot of damage going from this. I mean, 30%, 41% of my damage is dots, so it's very important to get them out, and this was actually one where I was healing a lot, not actually being able to focus on DPS too much. And like I said, I will swap to Amanthal's Wisdom when we get into raids, and at that point I'll probably go for the Rejuve build and just spam Rejuves on the entire groups. Yeah, and in terms of stat priority, I've been looking through a lot of like different Resto Druids at the moment as to what they're focusing, where their head's at with it. I've seen a lot of people going for haste, I've seen a lot of people going for mastery, and I've actually seen a couple of people go for just flat verse as like their best insult stat right now. Me personally, I actually want to go for around 350 of each is kind of my focus. So drop a little bit mastery and a little bit more haste and verse at the moment for me. I think it's just the best setup. Crit isn't obviously a bad one. You do get benefits from crit. You don't really get too many benefits from crit. So I would say that haste, I would say at the moment, mastery is better in... We go back to the old logic of mastery is better in dungeons, haste is better in raids, and versatility is just generally good because it increases your healing by a flat amount. So kind of get a balance of the three. I would say depending on like your raid healing, it would be either haste, mastery, verse, crit, or mastery, haste equal to verse, crit for dungeon healing. But yeah, guys, it's been a 15-minute video. It's probably a little bit longer than I wanted to do, but I think this is a good overview of Resto Druids in the Battle for Azeroth patch, pre-patch. We have already done, like I said, our 18 Vault of the Wardens. That video is already out, so definitely go and check that out if you haven't. Like, comment, subscribe, more guides coming soon. Thank you guys for watching. Catch you later.